Good morning. We'd like to welcome you to another edition of the Sunday School Review. This week's Sunday School lesson is entitled David's Sacrifice. It's taken from 1 Chronicles, the 21st chapter, verses 14 through 30. Okay, this lesson here, we have three outlines. The first outline is 1 Chronicles 21:14 through 17, and it's entitled The Destroying Angel. The second outline is verses 18 through 27, and it's entitled The Fiery Altar. And the third outline is the Sword of the Lord, and that's verses 28 through 30, 28, 29, and 30. Okay, let's go back to our first set of scriptures, our first outline, and it's in the 21st chapter, and the scripture reading starts at verse 14. But I want to call your attention to several verses in this 21st chapter before we get to verse 14. The first several verses there, like verses 1 through 4, David was intent to number the people. It was called a census of the people. Now, this was not a general census. This was a census of the fighting men available to fight. And there was one of his officers who basically said, namely Joab, said, well, I don't think that's a good idea. And verse 4, it says, nevertheless, the king's words prevail against Joab. So, I mean, after all, David was the king. So, there we go. So David did decide to number the people. As again, I said, this was the fighting men, not a general census. Okay, let's jump down to verse 7. And verse 7 says, and God was displeased with this thing, therefore to smote Israel. Now, so let's read 7 and 8. And David said unto the Lord, I have sinned greatly, because I have done this thing, but now I beseech thee to do away with the iniquity of thy servant, for I have done very foolishly. Now, in these two verses here, we see David's confession of sin. We see where David, he now, after these numbers came back, after he had done this, after he had done the counting, he confessed his confession of sin. He said, I've done very foolishly, and he said, do away with the iniquities of thy servant. Now, okay, that was the sin, and now we come to consequences. Let's go down to verse 11. Okay, so Gad came, this is verse, Gad came to David and said unto him, thus said the Lord. Now, David was given three options for the consequences of his sin. Now, let's be clear here. Okay, once a sin is committed, okay, it triggers consequences. Okay, consequences are ensue. So even though you may be forgiven, the consequences are still going to be there. Okay. So we have the sin, and you may have a confession and forgiveness, but the consequences remain. Okay. The consequences are there. So this is what this lesson is about, the consequences of the sin. Again, David confessed, but there are consequences. In verse 11, again, say, Gad came to David and said unto him, thus said the Lord, choose thee. There were three options in verse 12. Either 3 years of famine, that's one option, 3 years of famine. The second option, 3 months to be destroyed before thy foes, while that the sword of thine enemy overtake thee. So that's the second option. The third option, or else, this is the third option, or else 3 days of the sword of the Lord, even the pestilence in the land, and the angel of the Lord destroying throughout all the coasts of Israel. Now therefore advise thyself what word I shall bring again to him that sent me. In other words, there's a sin, and okay, yes, he confessed it. Lord is faithful to forgive, but there are consequences. The forgiveness and confession and forgiveness doesn't necessarily wipe away the consequences of that sin, the consequences, okay? So the three options were, and as I read them in 12, but now let's go to 13, verse 13. And David said unto Gad, this is the one verse before we get to our scripture. And David said unto Gad, I am in a great strait. In other words, I'm in a dilemma here. And here's what he said: let me fall into the hand of the Lord, for very great are his mercies, but let me not fall in the hands of man. So we see here David chooses option 3. And this is why in this verse it tells you why he chose option 3. He said, for the latter almost the latter clause, for great are his mercy. So David is saying, I'm going to throw myself on the mercies of God. I'm not gonna I don't want to be punished by man, because man has no mercy. But David understands that the Lord is a God of mercy. And we're going to see it in this lesson. The Lord is merciful. Man is not merciful. So he said, no, don't let me fall in the hands of man. So as I say, he was given the 3 options. You can look at him again in verse 12. He was given 3 options. He chose option 3. That is to throw himself on the mercies of God, because God is plenteous in mercy. Scripture clearly states that, and we're gonna read that scripture. We're gonna refer to that scripture. It's in Micah. Micah 7:18. It says, God delighteth in mercy. And David knew that. David knew that I will take my chances with God, because I know God is merciful. Man is not merciful. Man is unmerciful. So don't let me fall into man's hand. Let me fall in the hands of a merciful God. And that takes us to our first outline, which start with verse 14. So verse 14 said, So the Lord sent pestilence upon Israel, and there fell of Israel 70,000 men. Now, again, I said this is the third option. We just read it. If you want to refresh yourself, you go back to verse 12. This is the third option. So the Lord sends the third option. The Lord sent pestilence upon Israel. Now, note, and we're going to get to this as well, this era, and David is going to, David is clear in this, that it was my decision. So I don't think the people should suffer. That was his thing. We're gonna get to it. But the people, because of David's error, the people suffered. It says, the Lord sent pestilence upon Israel. Not just David, but Israel, okay? As a result of one man's error, that is David. Okay, that was verse 14 of the 21st chapter. The Lord sent pestilence upon Israel. Okay, and 70,000 men, 70,000. Now, the number, there was counting up the fighting men, and we don't know what was so serious about it, but nevertheless, it was an error. It was a problem with counting. Maybe it was David's pride or whatever, but it was a sin. So sin has consequences, and David's sin had consequences for all of Israel. Okay, so sin set in motion. The consequences are set in motion when the sin happened. Yes, you can be forgiven, but the consequences are set in motion. Okay, let's go to 15 now. And God sent an angel unto Jerusalem to destroy it. And as he was destroying, the Lord, behold, and he repented him of the evil, and said to the angel that destroyed it, enough, stay your hand. Okay, so it said all of Israel. Now, Jerusalem was David's home. Jerusalem was the capital. So up until that point in this lesson here, Israel had Jerusalem, not Israel. Jerusalem had been spared. In other words, the capital city, Jerusalem, had been spared. Okay, up until this point. So God sent an angel to destroy the city, and he was destroying. The Lord, behold, and he repented him of the evil. So the idea is David was correct in the fact that when it said the Lord, he repented of the evil. So he showed mercy. He said he's going to bring pestilence upon all Israel. All Israel, Jerusalem included. So Jerusalem was slated. The angel had the sword in his hand, getting ready to destroy Jerusalem. He had already begun the destruction process. But if you look here, and he said to the angel that destroyed it, enough. Hold up, stop. Now stay now thy hand. Okay, 15b. And the angel of the Lord stood by the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite. Okay, so the point is this, is that let's read 16. Let's read 16. Let's take in 16. At least 16a. And David lifted up his eyes and saw the angel of the Lord stand between the earth and heaven, having a drawn sword in his hand stretched out over Jerusalem. As I said, up to that point, Jerusalem, the capital city, David's home, had been spared destruction at that point. But right now, if we look at 16a, it said, David's eyes were opened. David was able to see. David's eyes was open. Said David lifted up his eyes and saw. David saw the angel standing with this standing between the earth and heaven, having this drawn sword in his hand stretched out over Jerusalem. In other words, David saw when David's eyes was opened up, and he was able to see the destroying angel with his sword in his hand, getting ready to destroy Jerusalem. And now, the only thing David, when he saw that, he probably said, we doomed. But it says here, the Lord told the angel, stay now thy hand. Now, most likely David didn't hear that. The angel was about to bring vengeance on the city, and all of a sudden it didn't happen. And David like, what happened? What happened? But the Lord stayed the angel's hand. He said in verse 15, stay now thy hand. And the angel obviously stayed his hand. But what David saw when he lifted up, what he saw the angel standing, as verse 16 said, between earth and heaven, having a drawn sword in his hand stretched out over Jerusalem, getting ready to destroy Jerusalem. Okay, now, and 16 B also said, and David and the elders. So that David and the elders was able to see this. David and the elders, that's what 16b said, who were clothed in sackcloth fell upon their faces. Okay, so when they saw this, they went down in sackcloth and ashes because of fear of the Jerusalem being destroyed. Okay, so here's 17. And David said unto God, he saw this, he fell down on their faces, and David said unto God, is it not I that commanded the people to be numbered? So basically, David takes the blame. He said, wait a minute. He said, in 17, is it not I that commanded the people to be numbered? Even I, it is that have sinned and done evil indeed. But as for these sheep, in other words, basically he's saying, I'm the one that messed up. Please let the people go. Don't punish them for my misdeeds. Okay, he said, indeed, but for these sheep, the meaning people, what have they done? As I said, the destruction was to bring, he chose the third option, to bring pestilence upon Israel as a nation, not just Jerusalem, not just David's house, but Jerusalem as a nation. And David, and we read it, his confession of sin in verse 8 of the 21st chapter, we read that. He confessed that he sinned, but and the options were given, and he chose the third option, and God commence in verse 14 to bring that option. And then Jerusalem was on the chopping block in verse 15. Jerusalem was on the chopping block, where it hadn't been before, but Jerusalem is now on the chopping block. And here, when the Lord opened David's eyes and the elders' eyes, he saw the angel, the destroyed angel, getting ready to destroy Jerusalem. And he went down to sackcloth, and sackcloth, and 16 and 17, he said, it was me. Blame me alone. It was I. And don't do this to the people. But as for the people, what have they done? Let thine heart, I pray thee, O Lord my God, be on me. Okay, I'm willing to take the consequences myself. Don't let the consequences fall on the people. I'm willing to take the consequences myself. David understood the mercy of God, so David threw himself on the mercy of God. He said, let the consequences fall on me alone. Okay, and let's finish up with 17. On me and on my father's house, but not on thy people, that they should be plagued. Okay, so David realized that God is a merciful God, and David would rather face judgment before a merciful God than to trust in man. He said, no, I don't trust man. Man will show me no mercy. God is a God of mercy. God of mercy. As it's in Micah 7:18, God delighteth in mercy. God is a merciful God. So I will rather face judgment before a merciful God than to face man. And again, as I said, with sin, it's has consequences, and the sin sets the consequences in motion. Yes, you may be forgiven, but the consequences remain. The consequences are still there. Okay. So this is what David is saying in verse 17. Let the consequences fall on me and me alone. And he's willing to face judgment before a merciful God rather than to face judgment before an unmerciful man. Okay, because man will show no mercy, whereas David knew that God was a merciful God. And as again, we see back in verse 15, how he said, it repented him of the evil. So God showed mercy. That's mercy there. He showed mercy. He was lenient. Okay. And David knew that God was a God of mercy. And the second outline starts at verse 18, the fiery altar. Okay, verse 18 says, then the angel of the Lord commanded Gad to say to David, okay, Gad was a prophet. He commanded Gad, the prophet Gad, to say to David that David should go up and set up an altar unto the Lord in the threshing floor of Ornan, the Jebusite. Okay, that what the Lord commanded the prophet Gad to say to David, to set up an altar unto the Lord on in the threshing floor of Ornan, the Jebusite. In verse 19, and David went up at the saying of Gad, the prophet, which he spake in the name of the Lord. And verse 20, 21, and it says, now Orman turned back and he saw the angel. This is the sight that Orman saw, Orman and his sons. It says, we don't get it. Ornan turned back and saw the angel, and his four sons with him. His four sons was with him. They hid. When they saw this sight, they saw the king. Now, I mean, if you saw the king, saw an angel, I mean, this was a sight that basically, I mean, in other words, what did I? How did I deserve this? Okay, so Orman, he was I think he was a non-Jew. He was he was just an ordinary person. He was out there threshing his wheat. Okay, now Orman, it says right here. Now Orman was threshing wheat, and as David came to Orman, and looked and saw, and Orman looked and saw David, and went out of the threshing floor and bowed himself to David, and his face to the ground. So basically, he's seen the angel, the king, and probably some of the king's servant. I mean, it was a shock to him when he sees this. I mean, what's the meaning of this? Okay, when he looked up and saw this. Now, like I said, he's an ordinary guy. This is an ordinary guy here. And 22 says, then David said to Ornan, he said, grant me. So now in verse 18 again, it's Gad told David, set up an altar unto the Lord on the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite. He told him where to set up the altar. So David goes, he goes to where Ornan at the threshing floor. He goes there, and Ornan sees this. What's the meaning of this? Okay, and 22. Then David said to Ornan, grant me the place of this threshing floor. In other words, grant me this, that I may build an altar therein unto the Lord. Thou shalt grant it for full price, that the plague may be stayed from the people. Now, this was the command. It says in 18, the Lord commanded Gad to tell David to build an altar on Orman the Jebusite threshing floor. So David goes with his the angel and his servants to talk to Ornan. He said, this is 22. He said, grant me the place of the threshing floor, that I may build an altar on it. Thou shalt grant me full price, that the plague may be stayed. He wanted to, he's out, basically what he said, I will pay you full price. I'll pay you full price for this threshing floor. And then let's look at what Ornan said. When he in 23, Ornan said unto David, take it to thee, and let my lord the king do what is good in his eyes. Lo, I give the oxen also for the burnt offering, because he knew, that they off the types of sacrifices that were used. I'll give you oxen for burnt offering, and the threshing instruments for wood, and the wheat for the meat offering. I give all. Basically, what he's saying, you can take it all. It's yours, free of charge. It's yours. It is yours. You can have it. Okay, you can have it. Do what you want with it. You can have this. I don't want any money. Just take it. Just take it. And here is the thing here. Here's where the sacrifice comes in, because that's the subject of this lesson, David's sacrifice. And the idea is, and this is what we're going to get into the next couple of verses, what David's response was to Ornan. And King David said to Ornan, nay, no, no, no. Said, but I will verily buy it for full price. He repeated again, I'm going to pay full price for it. For I will not take that which is thine for the Lord, nor offer burnt offering without cause. Okay, so David gave Ornan for the place 600 shekels of gold weight. I think the lesson points out that that would be equivalent to $400,000 today. But in other words, he paid him full price. But here's the rub here. Okay, there must be a sacrifice. Okay, David is saying, no, if I take this free of charge, there's no sacrifice for me. There's no sacrifice. There must be a sacrifice. And the scripture tells us we present our body a living sacrifice. That must be a cost. Now, salvation, we don't have to pay for salvation. Christ already paid for salvation. Okay, but the sacrifice that we still have to make a sacrifice, and the sacrifice is to present your body a living sacrifice. We know the scripture said we are not our own. You know the saying, well, it's my body, I can do what I want to do with it. No. If you belong to Christ, your body don't belong to you, so you can't do what you want to do with it. You can't take my property and do what you want to do with it. If you have a suit of clothes, you can take them out in your yard and burn them up. But you can't take my suit and burn it up. You can't do with my property anything you want to do. You can do with your property what you want to do, but your body does not belong to you. It belongs to Christ. Your body has been bought with a price. It doesn't belong to you. Okay, so you have to present your body as a living sacrifice. In other, you have to give it. We're talking about a spiritual worship. That's what we're talking about. Spiritual worship. A broken spirit, a contrite heart. Okay, so you have to present that to God. You can't do anything you want to do with your body. Now, the sacrifice as it relates to salvation, that price has already been paid. We don't have to pay the price of salvation. That's been paid. But you have to sacrifice your body, okay, if you want to go back with the Lord. There's a sacrifice that you have to make. There's a cost. If there is no cost, and this is what David was telling Ornan, if I take this property and don't give you any value, there is no sacrifice for me. I haven't sacrificed anything. You have to make a sacrifice. If I got a bunch of old clothes, I got a bunch of old clothes. I got some old clothes and I got some new clothes. And somebody needs some clothes, and I'm gonna go in my closet and get my old clothes that's worn out, too little or whatever, and give it to them. I ain't give nothing. I hadn't sacrificed nothing. If I was sacrificed, well, I just bought a new suit. I got 3 new suits. I'm gonna give you one of them. I'm gonna sacrifice. So that's what a sacrifice means, is to there's a cost involved. You want to be a Christian, there's a cost involved. You got to sacrifice something. And this is what David was the point that he was relaying to Ornan. I am not going to take what is thine, nor offering without cost. So David gave Ornan for the place 600 shekels, which again, as I said, is equivalent to $400,000 in today's money. So there has to be a sacrifice. There has to be a sacrifice. Your body is the Lord's body. It's not your body. It ain't, it's not, it's my body. I can do what I want to do with it. No, it's the Lord's body. It's not your body. So you can't do what you want to do with it. That's the sacrifice. You're giving that up. You're giving that up. Okay? So that's 24 and 25 is the sacrifice. The sacrifice has to cost something. If there's no cost involved, there is no sacrifice. Therefore, if David had got the threshing floor for nothing, it wouldn't have cost him nothing. There would have been no sacrifice that he made. Okay. Verse 26, it says, and David built there an altar unto the Lord, and offered burnt offering and peace offering, and he called upon the Lord, and he answered him from heaven by fire upon the altar of burnt offering. Okay, so basically David paid money, value for this threshing floor. Now let's go to the third outline, the sword of the Lord, and that's verses 28 through 30. 28 and 29 says, at that time when David saw that the Lord had answered him in the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite, then he sacrificed there. Where? On the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite. For the tabernacle of the Lord, which Moses made in the wilderness, and the altar of the burnt offering, which was at that season in the high place at Gideon. The altar was at Gideon. Okay, verse 30. But David could not go before it to inquire of God, for he was afraid because of the sword of the angel of the Lord. Now it's important here. This threshing floor was on was where Abraham was to sacrifice Isaac, his son Isaac. And it was in what the place it was Mount Moriah. Okay, if we go to is Genesis 22. Genesis 22. So this is the significance of this Ornan the Jebusite. This is the significance of that. Whereas in Genesis 22, I think 1 and 2. I believe and then, well, this is it says and it came to pass after these things, God did tempt Abram and said unto him, Abram, he said, behold, here am I. And he said, take now thy son, thy only son Isaac, whom thou lovest, and go into the land of Moriah. So this threshing floor was the place, was Mount Moriah. That's the significance of that. I mean, in other words, this that's why the Lord was so insistent that he said, go to Ornan the Jebusite, and that's where the sacrifice would be made. And it is Mount Moriah, the same place that Abraham was to sacrifice. He did not sacrifice Isaac, as you know, but he was, and he, when they got there, they said, well, where's the sacrifice? He said, the Lord will provide. And we know the Lord did provide the sacrifice, and the sacrifice was ultimately pointing to Jesus Christ. So that's our lesson today, David's sacrifice. And again, the key point and the lesson is that there must be a sacrifice. There must be a cost to you. If there's no cost to you, okay, the scripture said, present your bodies, Romans 12:1, present your body a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable, which is your reasonable service. Okay, so your body is not your own. So you must give spiritual a spiritual worship. That's your sacrifice. A broken heart, a contrite spirit. You yield your body to Christ, your members to Christ. You don't do what you want to do with your body because it has been purchased with a price. It has been purchased. And that's our lesson today. We'd like to thank you for watching. We ask you to join us next week for another edition of the Sunday School Review. Thank you.